Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of Duo Talk, hosted by myself and the wonderful Matthew Cochran. There he is. And we have some amazing guests with us. Brett Williams, who's no stranger to the show. It's his second time on. Must be popular, Brett. Lovely to have you with us. Thanks for joining us all the way from New York. And we are super happy to have the artist guitar duo of Julia and Christian Zelensky with us tonight as well. And it's so nice to see you guys again. It's been a long time since you were in Scotland, so I've missed you. Do you know you actually appeared on the show last time it was out a couple of weeks ago, because Nico from Open Strings Berlin, he showed one of your really incredible videos that you made with him. So you have technically been on the before.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So tonight's topic is all about the amazing, iconic guitar duo of Ida Presti and Alexandra Lagoya. And just to give our viewers a little bit of biographical information and background about the subject, and also just to sort of get us thinking about this topic as well, we have a fantastic introduction that Matthew put together for us. So we're going to play that now so everybody can get a little taste of the duo and a little bit of the history behind Ida Presti and Alexandra Lagoya.
Ida Presti was born in a Paris suburb in 1924. She gave her first recital at the age of 10 and quickly garnered praise from contemporary guitar luminaries such as Emilia Pujol and Andre Segovia, who said, quote, "I have nothing to teach her. She should not accept the advice of any other guitarist." And if you know anything about Segovia, you know that was high praise indeed. Ida Presti concertized throughout Europe, and by the late 1940s, she was firmly established as a major figure on the concert scene. Ida Presti met Alexandra Lagoya in 1951. Lagoya was already a guitarist of some repute, and when Presti and Lagoya formed a duo and were married in 1952, they essentially became a power couple of the international concert world. Between 1952 and 1967, Presti Lagoya completed 15 international concert tours and performed over 2,000 concerts together. Castelnuovo Tedesco, Jolivet, and Rodrigo all wrote major works for the duo. Presti and Lagoya frequently performed on television, radio, they made numerous audio recordings, and they were dedicated educators. Unfortunately, the duo's meteoric 15-year run came to an abrupt end in 1967 when Ida Presti was hospitalized after a concert with the St. Louis Symphony. The couple decided to fly to Rochester, New York for a concert the next day, but as soon as they arrived, Presti was taken directly to Strong Memorial Hospital, where she died from a massive internal hemorrhage due to a tumor that was discovered in her lung. Ida Presti was 42 years old. Alexander Lagoya went on to have a storied career as a performer and a teacher, and he remained active until his death in 1999. We'll give Lagoya the last word on Ida Presti, who he remembered in this way. Sensitive, passionate, with extreme seriousness. She was a genius. No guitarist in my whole life has moved me like she has. She was the music in persona. I believe she was the best guitarist of our century. She was something inexplicable. So they're really famous in their day. They're very close to like as close to a household name as a guitar duo could have been in the 1960s. I mean, you heard the 2,000 concerts in a 15-year span of time. That's over 130 concerts a year, which just hurts my brain to even imagine. And yet, and I'll pose this question to Julia and Christian and to Brett. Let me say a little bit about this first. I came across this duo, I think I was 25. Like, I'd been playing the guitar seriously quite some time before I ever even heard about Ida Presti or Alexandra Lagoya. And so my question, and we'll start with Julia and Christian, is when did you become aware of the Presti Lagoya duo?
I think as we started to play duo, because one of the first duos we played were some prelude and fugue by Castellan Vidovic, and it's written for them. So it was our first impression. We have been 19, so.
It's 17 years ago. It's a lot. And yeah, I think they are still famous until today. I think if you are playing like a duo, there are some big names and some big duos which had a big influence on the repertoire, on the duo play in general. And I think the first one is Presti Lagoya. So I think there is no way to come around them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And definitely after concerts, very often we some people talk to us after the concert, and they asked us also about the duo. So also in the audience, they're still quite like really well known.
Yeah, it's something like, I think it's the same like Presti Lagoya. It's named with the Assad duo, or maybe the duo Abreu, and they are like, I don't know, the big names now. And of course, we are playing a lot of pieces as well, which are written for them. And they discovered a lot of new compositions, and they made a lot of transcriptions. And
it's interesting that you mentioned the preludes and fugues of Tedesco, like because they're such a big contribution to guitar duo repertoire. And that, I think, was at the bequest of Segovia. I think Segovia pushed them in that direction. And obviously he was working with Tedesco and having so much music commissioned for himself as a soloist. But then he had this duo that he had a huge amount of respect for. And then he actually, I mean, he taught, didn't he? I mean, Presti played for Segovia.
Yeah.
And like you said in your intro, Matt, he was like hugely impressed with her playing. So obviously that connection is helped. I mean, Rodrigo also wrote for the Presti duo, but I think Ida Presti passed away not long after receiving some of the one of the concertos was originally written for them.
Yeah, the Madrigal concerto.
Yeah, but it had a different name.
Did it?
Yeah, it had a different name. So when it was written, I'm thinking right on this, but when it was written for, or when it was given to Presti and Lagoya, I think it had a different title. And then obviously after she died, they didn't get it. They didn't have it long enough to do anything with it. And then he offered it out to other guitar duos. And then I think there was a change in the title as well. As far as I think that's great. We'd have to. Sure, someone will jump on and tell us. That's a hint to everybody out there. If you want to ask us any questions, you're more than welcome to do so. I've just popped up the information there. If you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, you're on YouTube, just do it by way of a comment. Write a comment, ask your question, and we will do our best to answer it. And if anybody knows the answer to my Segovia, my Rodrigo, what was the title for the concerto? Let us know, or tell me if I'm just talking nonsense.
But I think even the Tunadia written by Rodrigo, I think it's one of the best pieces we have in original for guitar duo, and it's also written for them. So it's great.
Well, this is sort of the problem with the history of our instrument. It's just so. This reflects a larger issue, because this duo is so important to people. When I think the first time I heard about him was probably when I played in a master class with the Greek duo Evangelos and Liza. And they told me, I was like, I've never heard of them. I don't know what you're talking about. they were shocked, and everybody in the room was shocked, and Brett's so stupid. And you know, and then I went and I was like at Tower Records looking around for recordings. There were none.
Yeah.
And I was like, and you know, no books about them, nothing. And I just said, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Well, but this is sort of the issue, is that pre-Segovia guitar information about guitarists, not pre-Segovia guitar, but before Segovia started, you know, he has that thing where he reads into he talks about himself. He has like a oral biography that he does, right? Doesn't he?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Have you ever heard him? He's sitting there, he's talking about hanging out, being Segovia. You never listen to this?
No.
It goes on forever. But he doesn't. Yeah. But we don't have enough of that about guitarists, and this is everybody knows about these guys, but there's not. We don't even have access to the recordings. The original recordings aren't really. I couldn't find them streaming anywhere. All we have is compilations.
There is a reason for that as well. Like a lot of their records came out on Philips, and Philips didn't have a very good reach. I mean, they made some amazing recordings, but they didn't have a hugely good distribution. So, like records that were out on EMI or RCA Victor or all these other classic, you know, had a much bigger European and North American reach. But like a lot of people, were frustrated, I think, about that they were very well known within France, Belgium, these kind of like, you know, some of the European countries for sure, where Philips had that reach, but not so much in other ones. There's a lot of, I knew of Lagoya, weirdly, before knowing about Presti and Lagoya. And that was through recordings that he made with Jean-Pierre Rampal, the flute player in the 1980s. And they were all, I think they were all RCA Victor recordings, and they were with big orchestras. So the distribution and the reach was much more. Yeah. But there's now a Philips, like it's like a 3 or 4 CD box set. I mean, it's probably digitally available as well now. And it's pretty much everything they recorded for Philips. And it is incredible, you know, the amount of material that's there. But I can imagine you, Brett, going to Tower Records and being like, there's nothing.
What did I do? Why is this my problem?
Well, maybe you came across this, Brett. This might have been this might have been an American thing, but the only place I was able to find them, or you know, like find anything, was on a Guitar Player magazine cassette tape.
Oh wow!
That was called Masters of Classical Guitar, and this thing was wild. It had Bream like playing Reginald Smith Brindle, and then like Andy York was playing Sunburst on a steel string guitar. It had something from the David Starobin, like New Music with Guitar, and then Presti Lagoya playing the second Spanish Dance by Granados, like all on one cassette tape that was put out by Guitar Player magazine. I think maybe in the late 80s or early 90s. I mean, I found it in like a discount.
It's a really best of.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, we just don't have that much. Does anybody know anybody other than Leona Boyd who knew him, like personally?
Oh, like as in know that person personally?
Who knew Lagoya? Yeah, because I know Leona Boyd studied with him, and then she wrote something in her book about him. She said that they, you know, yeah. Did you guys know about this?
No.
Oh, you don't know?
No.
Well, no. Leona Boyd has a bunch of stuff in her books about guys and about what happens when boys and girls come together. So it's a Leona Boyd, but Leona Boyd's book is like it's kind of like Mozart in the Jungle, except all the Mozarts are they're all dead. It's a little different in that way, but yeah, no, that's a thing. Other than that, I don't know anybody who knew him.
Well, I mean, we a lot of people have passed on. That's the problem. I mean, like Jack Duar over here in the UK was a big fan of the duo, and you know, I think even wrote for them as well. You know, we're talking about Rodrigo and Tedesco and these people writing for the duo. Right. But of course, like, you know, to get the stories, you know, would be would be difficult. I'm going to have to read Leona's book now. You've got me like completely.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's not only that, but also I came across something else. You know, if you think about it, so they got married. I mean, there's like a lot there that we should know, and I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, but there is. They got married. She already was married. She already had a kid.
That's right. Yeah.
And he just, like, the year he met her, he's like, you're coming with me.
Well, I think she was his idol, really, wasn't? I mean, I think he was kind of, you know, you said that you first came to know of them or know Lagoya through the Greek duo that you played to, and Lagoya has Greek heritage. And I think when he came to
I thought he was Egyptian. He's Egyptian, Greek, all that stuff just came.
No, I think it's Greek. Well, I mean, we can check again. Again, we're looking for some arbiter in the comments to come in and tell us. But like,
come in and tell us about this stuff, because not only that, but tell us about where were they in World War II? They were in their 20s in World War II. There's no information about where they were, what they were doing, how that affected. They were in Paris in World War II, and we don't know anything about that. Shameful.
We definitely know that Presti was in Paris during World War II.
That's true.
Do we actually know where Lagoya was?
Who knows?
Yeah, it's
crazy.
Because they get started in like 1951. I think they like meet each other at one of these like salon type things, and then they're married the next year, and they are on the road like that.
Yeah. So they were probably
She goes to see a concert that he gives at a guitar society, I think, isn't it? And then she proclaims him to be the greatest guitarist that she's ever heard.
I think that's the other way around. I think it's Lagoya saying that. Do I have that wrong?
No, I don't know. I thought it was the other way around, but I also think it's a case of like, you know, maybe they'd only each heard one other guitarist. You know,
she's amazing, and I think part of her longevity, when you listen to Martha Masters talk about her and stuff like that, part of her longevity is her effect on young women guitarists. I think that's part. Maybe one of the biggest aspects of that legacy is how good she was, and how, I mean, that must have been must have had profound effects on young women guitarists who were coming up at that time, or in the 60s and 70s. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why they're still around. It's just because she was so good.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, another reason for that is probably the amount of compositions that are left as well. You know, there's a huge amount of young players actually finding Presti's music and some of Lagoya's music and performing it and recording it now, which is really important.
And it's so good. It's so good. It's as good as anything else written by anybody.
Of course.
Her music.
Yeah.
Shall we hear a little bit of them? Shall we?
That's a great idea.
A nice way to sort of like, you know, because we're talking about them, but I've got some stuff lined up here and we can actually hear them play. So maybe we could, let's go old. Let's hear them play some Scarlatti, because I think for a lot of guitarists out there, we all try and imitate keyboard players all the time. It's like some sort of illness that we all suffer from, you know. Guitar duos, I mean, Christian and Julia, you can speak to this, I'm sure, after we hear the clip, but we all arrange Scarlatti, we play Bach, we play all these keyboard works and kind of divide the hands and see what we can do with them. And when you hear this Presti and Lagoya performance of some Scarlatti, we hear some of the things that we think we are kind of new to the game doing, and then you hear this has been happening for a long time. So here's them playing some very dramatic Scarlatti. I think it's a sonata in B minor. Whoa.
Amazing, huh?
Yeah. Incredible. All those cross-string trills.
Yeah.
In 1950,
Wow, mercilessly vibrato while you're doing.
Yeah, it's like trying to sound like a keyboard, but also put vibrato on at the same time. Like
Yeah.
it's like a real kind of like screwing.
Taking your harpsichord and shaking it as hard as you can.
But better. Like, So what do you think of that, Julia and Christian, when you hear that, like, you know, in 2023, as a great guitar duo yourselves, like, what does hearing that old Scarlatti make you feel?
Well, I think what you realize immediately is that this is a real duo. So it's not like two soloists putting together, and you can listen with all the small details, with the phrasing, with the balance of the melody and the accompaniment, and with the colors, with the dynamic. All the things are totally clear. And as we know, this takes a lot of time to rehearse because it looks so easy and it looks so fluent and it looks like everything is clear. But this result is a lot of work in the background. So
and they're playing so perfectly together. They're playing so tight. I mean, if you're playing a keyboard, to bring your left and right hand together is already not so easy. But to get two guitars so tightly together, it's amazing.
Yeah. The synchronicity is something else. It's also, do you know, I feel watching it that there's it's really odd, right? Because, you know, we're always going to compare, and like you already mentioned them, Christian, you said like it's just, you know, they're like a name like the Assads, like the Assad brothers, who I'm sure we'll probably talk about on this show at some point in the future, the great Brazilian duo. Yeah. But like they look telepathic when they play, in that sense that like, okay, they're brothers, but they look distinctly different. I mean, I know it's not just male and female, it's not that simple, but like I feel like they have really different ways dealing with the instrument, of like relating to it. But like you say, it's so together. And you're talking about the amount of work that's gone into that. It must be incredible, because they both have very different ways of approaching the instrument. It's not so similar.
Yeah.
Physically.
But I think this is the special thing as well. So they can play like sounding like one instrument, but you also realize the two characters you spoke about, no? And I think that's very interesting to watch and to listen as well, that you have, it's not like you're watching two persons with the same character, but with completely different kind of play and kind of phrasing, but putting that together, it's very interesting, in my opinion.
And I think it's also interesting that Ida Presti was like, she was a star already, no? And then they played the duo, but if you watch them and you didn't know that she was a star, you wouldn't get it, no? Because she really has no special, I don't know, attitude or something like that. It's not like she's playing and he's just accompanying her or something.
Yeah, no, it's very democratic in that way, I guess.
Feministic,
very progressive,
maybe too democratic, you know. Because I think you can. I mean, I think the viewer can definitely see the fireworks coming from Presti, but as you said, they are really tight. I mean, like I couldn't find. Not like I was looking for it, but I mean, I couldn't find anything where I couldn't just very easily take the recording and place that on a concert today, and it stacks up with any, you know, professional.
And that goes with their recordings too. The for it being 1960 or whatever, or it sounds like it was recorded in the 80s.
Yeah, like
just the level of craftsmanship to everything they did that we do have is so good.
Yeah,
and I mean, definitely, you know, just you could see where we talked about this last time I was on the show, but I think a big part of being in a duo is who's sitting on the left and who's sitting on the right, because the person sitting on the left can look at their left hand and see the person. So I was in a duo, and Giacomo was more comfortable just I wanted to make sure I was the one who's sort of responsible for making sure everything really lined up. And maybe that's where Lagoya comes in, you know, because she's definitely got these fireworks and everything going on, but there's definitely an artistry to the stage right guitarist having to make sure that this is all going on, because the other guitarists sometimes, as you guys know, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but sometimes they're kind of just doing their own thing and having to use their ear. But the guy on the right is like kind of like the stopgap to when things can really go to shit. Oh, is it okay to? Can I not say that? I don't know if I swore on it.
You just did say it. So. There we are. That'll be the only.
That's it. I'll never do it again. I just
it's certainly an apt term. I mean, and Julia and Christian, I'd love to hear your answer to this. First of all, who sits stage right and who sits stage left?
I'm sitting on the right, but I don't know if I agree.
Okay.
I don't know. I think as I experience our playing, it's like really we try to connect, and so it's not like he's playing and I'm just looking after him and trying to play tight with him. He also, I think, he also tries to listen to what I'm doing. Because it's not like the left guitarist is playing the first guitar and the right guitarist is playing the second guitar. It's changing all the time, and they also do it. So it changes all the time. I don't know.
I think there's maybe a more. I mean, not to make it sound like I'm looking for something that's more complicated, but I think there might be something more sophisticated at play here, because, and I think Christian maybe hit the nail on the head, and I think you have too there, Julian, just saying, I don't think it's about that. Because they're so distinctly different, right? He's much older, or I think he's a bit older anyway.
I think he's like only 3 or 4 years older. I thought he was way older.
He looks like a dinosaur. No, he doesn't look like a dinosaur. I can't say that. But in comparison to her in some of the videos, I was like, look a bit like her dad, right? So anyway,
it's a warning for people growing mustaches.
It's a certain
don't do it.
It's a Jane we can embrace, right? She embraced it. So anyway, but like they approach the instrument differently, and it's like they've decided to orchestrate when they play, because their use of, like, we talked about the trills and the cross strings, and then the crazy amount of vibrato, and the color is insane. Like, I know that they have Lagoya has a very pronounced kind of like this position with his right hand. But when they go between these like fierce pizzicatos and then like into these really super tasto sort of stuff, it's not about like matching the sound all the time. It's about creating like a texture. And I wonder, like, if that's because they're so different, but they play with such synchronicity, maybe they've worked so hard to achieve that level of registration and orchestration in what they're doing. You know, like none of it sounds like an accident, that they just kind of sound the same, if that makes sense, you know?
You can also see that they what's a little bit surprising in the beginning, that they don't communicate so much. It's not like they're looking at each other very much. They don't showing the when they want to start, or I don't know. I think it's because they just they practice this so well and also rehearsed so well, and they're just listening each other so well.
Yeah.
The ideas musically are good, you know. They're really strong musical ideas. Like,
Yes.
in the Scarlatti, I was like, okay, I played the end of the clip, so we're coming to the end of the sonata, so there's a sort of recapitulation of the first sort of idea of the theme, but like the rubato at the end is really clever. It's almost like this kind of metric, likely decided rubato. It's not something that they've just done on the fly. Like they really decided, and then the tone color comes together, and this, like you were saying, Brett, the recording sounds great. There's this rich, dark sort of chocolatiness at the end, the way they end up on that last B minor chord. I think it's just that's not an accident. Like there's no way, you know. And sometimes, I'm not saying it's like other duos, like the Assad brothers are amazing, but sometimes I just feel like they're telepathic. It's like they're twins. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like they're just doing the same thing sometimes. And I know that you know, Odair and Sergio are like heroes. So I know they know I don't really think that, but like, I think there's such a decision making has gone on clearly for Ida and Alexandra. You know?
For sure, I'm sure. And what I like really, I think the most of the duo is because they have all the technical possibilities to do it, but I have the feeling that they always put the music in front.
Mhm.
It's not about the players themselves, but it's always about the music, about the different styles. If they play French music or Baroque music, you listen immediately to a different approach, different style, different interpretation. But I have the feeling that never the soloists are in front, always the music.
Yeah.
And Julia was talking earlier about the sort of unassuming nature of Ida Presti. She's not up there. They're not just sitting there trying to there's no sort of arrogance. And isn't that what we find with all the best of the best players, is that they just don't have that. They don't have that attitude.
Yeah, it's weird.
They're not interested.
The music is in front.
Yeah, they're just not interested. They're like you say, the music is in front. Their ideas are way past that. Like, you know, like they're not. It's not how they look or how they sound. It's like, what are we trying to do? Where are we getting to? What's the point of what we're doing? That's what they're interested in. Now, we are very honoured, ladies and gentlemen, because we have a person who I think, and then she's on the chat, so she can correct me if she's wrong for sure. But I think she definitely studied with Alexandra Lagoya, and is absolutely a historian of the duo. Alice Art's an amazing guitar pedagogue and performer in her own right, and she's just pulling me up absolutely as she should. Lagoya was several years younger than Presti, younger in all capitals. So I mean, I hold my hand up. If I remember well, younger. Absolutely. Presti was 43 when she died, and at that time Lagoya was 37. So there's me, just looking at, you know, the guy in the suit with the big rimmed glasses and the big moustache, looking really kind of, you know, like her dad. And he's there we go. There we go.
Again, this is a warning for the mustache. You know, I think this is a powerful warning.
It's even, the mustache is even worse than we thought it was.
Yeah.
It not only ages you, but it makes people on live streams wrong. So yeah, that's really important.
But thank you very much, Alice.
Thank you, Alice. Great.
Yeah, Alice. We referred to your work often. She's a big, you know, historian about this duo.
Amazing. And if Alice is listening, which obviously she is, but I mean, if she wants to help us out at any point on the chat, we would be honoured to hear from her. So thank you so much. Yes. And I was just, you know, when we were talking about recordings then, I mean, I think all of us teach at some point, and we teach, you know, younger generations of guitarists to play the instrument better and perform. And often, like, I find myself saying, go and listen to a recording of someone. And, you know, there's always a nostalgia with this, like, you know, and I don't know if any of you have found this, but like, because recordings aren't so high fidelity in historical recordings, like what we just listened to, we can hear how great that recording sounds, but we have to turn our ears on and we have to really listen, because it's not the shiny digital, very, very, very close mic'd, really clear recordings that we're used to. Sometimes I've sort of suggested to students, go and listen to this because it's so brilliant, you know, and then they're put off. The students are just put off by these old historical recordings because it doesn't sound like what they expect, you know. And I think it's a real shame, you know, sometimes, because there's so much detail in these old recordings, you know, for you to listen in a different way.
Yeah, you talked about that before we went, about how listening in a different way and how that experience is important. It's the same experience that you have when you put a record on or any of that other stuff. It's just, it's listening in a different way, right?
Well, that's very challenging. I think that's a big ask, particularly given the way that I think a lot of students and a lot of consumers of music right now are used to taking in music. You know, I don't think we have quite the same relationship with fidelity that maybe we used to when those records were being made. You know, like those are records that are definitely intended to be played on a hi-fi system with like really good equipment and or with the best equipment that you have available. And of course recordings had a certain I think they were regarded as something sort of more dear or important than I think our current listening culture suggests.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of hurdles to get over, and I'm assuming most of us have eventually kind of gotten there because we're just hungry to hear good performances or hear really interesting interpretations, which they're out there if you are willing to go back, go backward and look. And I think it's so remarkable what these two were able to do in such a short period of time. I mean, 15 years. That's not a long time. And what they were able to do in that 15 years, because I mean, we haven't actually talked about some of the practicalities of being a married couple on the road, playing all of these concerts. They had a child together, yeah, and then they're doing this really, again, kind of an old, like playing 130 plus concerts in a year. That is, I can't think of a current artist who's doing that kind of thing, or let alone sustaining it for that period of time. So it's really remarkable. So I think actually, Julia and Christian, you can kind of tell us a little bit about some of the practicalities of being, both artistic and domestic partners. How do you do it?
Yeah, I've always wondered that.
Getting a long evening.
Should I leave?
No.
Oh, you need to stay.
Well, in our case, it's we started to play duo, so we haven't been a couple before. So we played some years together. I think 5, 6, or 7 years. So we created a kind of working. To say
atmosphere.
So we have been very open from the beginning, so we could rehearse very open and say everything very clearly, and so there was no personal problems in at the beginning. So and the good thing is that after that we became a couple, so we had the two parts, I think, in our case. So we had the work part and the private part, which was like the second part. Yeah, I don't know how to say. And
Actually, it's of course not always easy to divide, because when we rehearse, we're very open and say everything we don't like, and before we became a couple, we very often also had big discussions and something like that, and then to divide it from the private life is not always easy. But I have to say that after we became a couple, it got easier. I don't know, maybe. And for me, I think it's beautiful to be on stage together, and also the time after the concert that you can have it together. So and not one soloist is going everywhere and the others at home. It's a beautiful side.
You can share all the moments together.
Yes.
It's nice, and I think it was the first I thought about that maybe. They got a couple because it's the same. Like Ida Presti was married before, but she was like on solo tour all the time, and I think it's not so easy being without your partner all the time. And so I think it's to travel. I think it's much nicer to have your family with you.
Do you think for Lagoya sorry, Brett? Like,
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking for Lagoya, like after she died, he had to. He kind of withdrew a little bit from performing concerts. I mean, he came back, and and he was doing chamber music again, like with I think I mentioned Rampal already, and there was definitely a return to concertizing, but it's nothing like that frequency that Matthew was sort of suggesting. There's 150 concerts a year. It was nothing like that, and dedicating his life a lot more to teaching and things like that afterwards as well. So it's probably that level of kind of closeness, was a big deal, like you're sort of expressing. Sorry, Brett, you were about to say something.
No, that's I'll go with what you were saying, because it is interesting. I mean, the idea of picking up that instrument after somebody that they clearly loved each other, especially she left the husband, had the kid, it was a young child. It wasn't like a teenager, right? I'm assuming maybe Alice can speak to that, but it must have been hard for him to even pick up the instrument, for a couple of years. It would be for me. If my instrument was tied to my wife, it would be very difficult for me to play if something had happened to her. So again, this is the kind of stuff I wish we had.
We're also talking about trauma.
Yeah, straight up trauma. She's 42 years old. That's incredibly young.
Yeah.
To lose, especially with everything.
Well, it happened apparently so fast. I mean, as I understand it, and once again, this might be a thing where we have to defer to the experts. So Alice, tag us if we're off here. But my understanding is it was a concert with St. Louis Symphony, and she gets sick. She goes to seek medical help in St. Louis. They are cleared to travel and decide to travel the next day. And then they get to Rochester, New York, where they're supposed to play a concert in Brockport, possibly, which is close, and is rushed to the hospital. And that's it. That's it. I mean, can you imagine something so tragic, happening so fast without any kind of
there's also the element of supposedly that when her doctor said don't travel, and then they traveled, so you can only imagine the guilt that he felt about being involved in that decision, or like I mean, I can't imagine. It's got to be incredibly hard to live with, but as far and just as far as like what's just husband-wife duos, it is an amazing thing. It's one of the most beautiful things. I think it's the last time I think I cried during watching somebody play was watching a video. Watching people play live often gets me. Any sort of live performance, I have an emotional reaction to if they're doing well. But I think the last time I cried just with the media on YouTube was that did you guys? It's like 10 or 15 years ago. They're divorced now, unfortunately. But it was Johannes Moeller and his wife, Laura. Yeah. Do you remember that video? They were playing Giuliani or something. And just the way she was looking at him. And oh my God, I just was like, not expecting that, because it's just usually videos of people practicing. And all of a sudden there's just like this, the most beautiful look in her eyes. I mean, it was just such an outstanding moment. So there's so many layers to what you guys are doing, Julia and Christian. It's so much fun to watch a husband-wife duo. I think it's a very unique situation. How often does that happen in classical music? How often can you get up there with your wife and perform just the two of you? Like what other there's nothing else like that. Maybe like a violin sonata situation. That's different. So this is like a really unique situation that you can be in with the person that you have chosen to spend your life with. I wish you, Liz, can you learn guitar? She doesn't even know what a chord is. I asked her what a chord is. She goes, I don't know.
I think you should do it.
I definitely want to see this experiment. Like,
I want to meet.
She's just like holding the guitar, like.
I just wonder if you would deal with being in a duo with you, Brett. I think that would just be amazing. Like,
I think it's amazing. That's why she's around. 46, first wife,
I think we should
because I'm a very difficult person. There's no doubt.
We should all play with Brett, like, you know, just one time, you know, just one time. Well, we've got an interesting point coming in from Steve, Steve Gary, and he says the point about old recordings is the same for many virtuosi, I think you mean here, like Glenn Gould, Pablo Casals. The recordings are not so high quality, but the musicianship is fantastic and worth listening to. And it's interesting. I think I totally agree. And I know we've sort of, you know, we've talked about the sort of like the fact that they were married and playing in a duo as well. And this point is interesting, coming back to what we talked about before, just this maybe this reluctance to engage with the sort of more younger audience now, or the sort of more mainstream recordings that we're used to. And I think like it's not that the recordings are not really that high quality. Like in some cases they are. The microphones are incredible. The halls in which they're recorded in are great. I think it's the delivery systems. Like, you know, think about how good our phones are now and how good, you know, everything is that we play back all of these recordings on. Like if you were at Abbey Road or if you were at CBS and you were listening to some of these recordings in the original studios when Casals was in or Glenn Gould was in, the recording quality is incredible. Even to tape, it's still incredibly high quality. But nowadays, everybody is playing these recordings back on systems that have got such high fidelity and they're so accessible to us all the time. And I think that changes the experience. Like if you're used to hearing everything, it's really super shiny, it's coming through your iPhone, and then suddenly you hear one of these recordings, you're like, whoa, that just sounds so different, you know, and it's jarring, you know. So yeah. So should we hear from them again? Should we hear a little bit more from the duo? Listen to them performing one of these works that all guitar duos, I think it's like a rite of passage. Everyone has to play the La Vida Breve by Manuel de Falla. Amazing.
I love it, but did you take a look at that thumb? Like that is some wild footage. I mean, like so much. I mean, I got a little bit of that kind of bendy stuff going on, but there was so like that's hard. That's really hard to pull that off. And all of those different tones that they were coming up with, I don't know. I mean, obviously, all of this is worked out. Obviously, all of this is extremely well rehearsed. But how? How do they do it?
I don't know. And it's also just like those are one takes. You know, that's the other thing to think about. These, you know, it was so expensive to record. This is not something like we do these days, where we're doing our own 2-camera shoots. It's, you know. You do it in an afternoon. It's unbelievable that was one take. And she was, not only that, if it was one take for me and I was her, there's no way I would have incorporated that much rubato into that opening phrase. I would have been like, oh, you know, I'm freaking out. There's no way I would have done it. And she's just like, I don't care. I'm fine. You know, whatever. Doesn't matter. What happens, happens. I mean, she really took that rubato for a ride. You know,
she really did, and it's risky. I think there was I think she was playing with a great deal of like energy, but also with a great deal of risk. Maybe not to her.
I think so.
Message.
Yeah, exactly. And he was too.
And he was too. Yes,
he was too.
Yeah. I think I think it's a very natural thing to sort of look at Presti with this super clear amount of virtuosity that she is bringing to that presentation, and forget that there's something very important that's happening on the on the other side of it. So I believe Matthew has he's having like kind of he's having some technical difficulties, I suppose, right now.
No, he's just going to the bathroom and he's taking us with him.
Okay.
It's exciting. It's never been done on the show before.
That's nice.
So Julia and Christian, have you had those moments when you're on stage, it's a live performance, and you've just decided today's the day, we're going to go for it, or one of you decides, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to push this tempo, and we're just going to sort of see what happens?
No way.
No.
Yeah. I mean, not in a duo situation, right?
Well,
I mean, I mean, we know why not, but tell us why not.
No, I think it depends on different matters. Depends on the room. Depends on the acoustic you are in. Depends on if it's a church or a concert hall. Is it with amplification or not? Something. So I think we have a range of tempo we can go, and sometimes, of course, if it's an important concert and you are nervous, you're getting more quick than you want to. I think it's normal. But if we are prepared well, which is we hope to be, it's okay. So it will stay in a range, of course, with a little bit of risk. Sometimes it's necessary. There are some pieces like Tonadilla or something with the scales, or Piazzolla Tango Suite or the Bogdanovich Sonata. They are incredible quick. So there is a risk for us always, because we are not like this genius talent like Ida Presti or Lagoya were. But we try to now know our limits and to go just to the border we can stay. Yeah.
And of course, we are deciding the tempo which we think is the best for the piece. So it's not like in concerts that you're spontaneously think, oh, maybe today I'm feeling a little bit faster. Yeah. And also you always have the feeling for your partner. And if you feel, okay, my partner does not feel very comfortable, you don't go for it. No. So I don't know, you don't do it. So
I remember doing a concert one time, and I was filling in for another guitarist and it wasn't a guitar duo, it was guitar and cello. And it was that piece, the La Vie de Brève, that we just heard. And I had played it for like 15 years with a violinist. And this cellist was great, so he could play it on cello, but not at the tempo that I had played it at with this violinist for years, because obviously it's all thumb position and incredibly hard. Yeah. And like, when you're in a concert situation, stuff happens that never happens in a rehearsal. So I was just sitting there and I was like, next piece, La Vie de Brève, great, that's fine. And started that first chord and this was off, like in my kind of like, oh, violin and guitar tempo. And I looked around and the cellist was like, like I can see steam.
Very frightening.
Like you're trying to do this really like, this is a deliberate rallentando. I'm just going to pull it back, like just really nice and casual, like nothing's happened, like like pulling something back from like 160 beats per minute to like 120, like really steadily, like So I think Julia's right. I think you should never take the risk.
Well, you also they were doing something where they were. This could have all also been completely premeditated. Like they could have figured this all out and figured out those rubatos, because there was a point, especially if you looked at him, there was a point right as they were about to go into the development section when he clearly went boom, and played the downbeat. So I think that they were like, okay, at this point, we all got to come back together. We all got to be on the downbeat together.
I agree with that. I think it's like that. Yes, I think
agreements.
They have some. You have some points. Always, you have some points when you can stop and you can react. And I think there is not so much risky thing in this recording as well.
Yeah.
They're like landing points or sort of landmarks.
Exactly.
Exactly. I mean, it's funny, like, you were both saying, working together, you can be very open and very direct. And I was thinking, like, that's interesting because, like, when you work with a conductor or you work with an orchestra, things are very formal at times, like, and can be quite like, I can sometimes be sitting around being like, anybody want to start making music? Anytime anyone wants to start doing something artistic and creative, just let me know, because I'm over here and I've been trying to do that for, 41 years. But like anytime now, and it's like you're like it's like an accountant meeting or something, like a business meeting. So it's nice to hear that, like, that you guys have got that, and you can hear it in the duo, like, okay, there are telegraph moments, like, but there's freedom within that. It's good. I can see Alice has it's amazing. Thank you so much, Alice, for watching tonight. It means a lot to all of us, I think. And she's just commenting on different things as we go, and some things I can show. I think just getting the head around the comment section and the technology is a wee bit tricky at times. But this is interesting because there was a question that I didn't put up earlier on, and it was like, did Bream and Williams meet Ida Presti and Alexandra Lagoya? And Alice was talking about, Presti was sort of taught by her father, who didn't play the guitar. Segovia heard her as a child in Paris, as Matthew mentioned at the beginning of the show, and said that she already knew everything, so she didn't need any more teaching. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure about that statement coming from Segovia personally. Like, I wonder if there's something behind that.
Oh, you think there's you think that's a bit of a reach, maybe Segovia?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a reach. I mean, I'm sure it's a pretty accurate quote, but I just it's out of character for Segovia. There's something else going on.
Yeah, his whole thing was like, I am about teaching you stuff you don't know. Like, that's his entire thing.
Yeah, OM.
It's like, you don't know as much as I do.
Yeah, I mean, we can see that kind of.
That's on his tombstone. I believe it's on Segovia's tombstone. You don't know as much as I do, so I can't imagine him. I can't imagine him, but it's possible. And also this was a different time, which sort of takes us back to like sort of like thinking about like I didn't really get around to it, but what else was going on in 1958, 1960, 1970? They made in 1951, first recordings 1953. Then things start to really take off in like 61 to 65 is sort of when I saw a lot of the recordings coming up. What else was going on? Gilia was just sort of a kid. I don't know exactly, other than Segovia. I'm sure that I'm just like blanking on names, but
no, there's
still was sort of in the atmosphere.
There's people like Regino Sandelamata. There's people like Alirio Diaz. There's people coming to Europe because of Segovia as well, and starting to sort of pulled in different directions and things like that, but I mean, in terms of recorded output, like we sort of already talked about, like, maybe the distribution of the records wasn't so good, so they weren't permeating different sort of markets and stuff like that. But like, there's it's hard to find another duo at that time, exactly that period that you're saying, that is kind of maybe as comparable with the commissioning and things like that, but the connection to Segovia is obviously so strong. It's interesting. Sorry, Alice is just like bombarding the comments, which we can see, and I think we have to sort of put a few up. I think this is fascinating because Alice says their tone and color changes were due to the possibilities of her right hand position, which works so very well and is so very strong. She did this as a child, and Lagoya changed to that when he first met her. So what Alice is saying there is Lagoya actually, changes his technique to sort of match hers to a certain extent. But I can say this definitely from like let's say a UK standpoint or a non-French standpoint, actually, in terms of the right hand, is that like a lot of French players have that very kind of right angle kind of thing with the thumb, and then the fingers are more of a direct plane across the string. And I would say that a lot of more UK players certainly don't kind of have as extreme an option of that, and the tone colors and possibilities are massive with that kind of French style. But then there are other sort of, you know, pros and cons when it goes to the extremes of right hand setup. But it's fascinating to see.
I've been instructed by several guitar instructors to not overextend the thumb, and that it can cause all sorts of problems. And for me, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, a flex thumb is a healthy thumb. That's what Adam Holzman taught me. So this is a flex thumb, right? And this is an unhealthy. But yeah, but Segovia, all of them, they're always just banging away like they're playing the theme from Seinfeld.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that's another like very like interesting thing is when you go backward a little bit from, you know, all of your contemporaries, and I think all of us are acutely aware of our contemporaries. But it's really fascinating to see some of the things that, like you were saying, Brett, we've been sort of taught not to do. It's utterly fascinating to see it work so well, and to then kind of question, like, okay, well, where did this commonly determined right hand position come from? Because they're making it work. Segovia made it work. You know, plenty of people made it work, and the documentation is right there in front of us. And most of these people had very, very long careers, and they were healthy. So anytime we look at some of these more historic characters, that's always a thing that seems to come up as like, wait a minute, I thought we weren't supposed to do this, you know. But it's just proof positive. Well, at least for me anyway, it's just proof positive that that what works is what matters. You know? A changing technical landscape at all points, you know. Whenever you go backward.
Remember when, if you didn't do what Aaron Shear told you to do, you were going to end up dead in a ditch?
Or worse, your hand would feel uncomfortable.
Well, that's all. We nobody thinks that anymore, you know.
Those are quite scary, you know, teacher-student relationships. When someone says it's this way, it's like my way or the highway, you know. And I think like there's something you can see in Lagoya that is malleable and flexible. Like Alice has already chimed in and said he changed. He saw Ida Presti play with that right hand, and he went for it. He was like, right, okay, I can do that too. Which is a little bit like the second co-principal player in an orchestra. Who you got a principal player who's amazing, has got this big sound, this way of playing, this kind of vibrato, and the co-principal player is like, yeah, okay, I can do that too, and does it, and everything works, you know. And then like someone else comes in and they go, yeah, I can do that too, and everything else works, because they're very flexible and they're very easy to change. And it's like Ida Presti is clearly a bit of a phenom. Like she can just kind of do it. I'm not saying she's not questioning it. I'm not saying she's not thinking about it. She could be. We'll never know, you know. But there's also something very strong in the Lagoya thing of being like, I can match that, or I can, for the betterment of the music. Like Matt, what you just said was like, it's what works that counts. And it's like the right hand topic is, it's kind of like the bane of guitar festivals. I mean, we all know this. You go to a guitar festival and like, you know, there's a group of people in the bar talking about right hand technique. And I'm like, is there another bar? You know, just anywhere else. Like,
and strings, right hand and strings.
Exactly. And I mean, God, they played off the other side of the nail. I mean, where do we want to go with this? But they, you know, we were talking about this before we came on air. They didn't play from the left. They played from the right, which is another minefield. And I mean, there are some players out there that still do that, you know. I think Thomas Viloteau maybe does that. He plays off the other side of the nail, or he definitely has quite a particular kind of peak on his nail that's quite in the middle, or much further over than we would have. So, you know, it is whatever works. And that right hand, like, you know, you look at pictures of Soar historically, you look at, like, you know, there's no right or wrong way. It's whatever works. You know, I just wonder if, like, we expect something different in the sound nowadays. We expect more uniformity in the sound and more uniformity of tone. We expect less extraneous noises, like less string squeak, less fretting noise. maybe less nail contact with the string, and maybe sometimes that posture is a little bit more susceptible to that happening when you play live than a slightly more lutenist looking right hand, but without the thumb sort of, you know, doing anything crazy, like more like what David Russell has or Manuel Barrueco has, that kind of like I'm often like, that's a really good right hand, look at that, you know, and I would look at like maybe Roland Diens and be like, I don't know how you're doing that, man. You know, that's crazy to me, you know.
So is it a French phenomenon then, you think? I mean, you're talking about Thomas and Roland Diens, those are, you know, French players, right?
Yeah, so, Thomas doesn't have the extreme angle, but he just has a nail shape that's a little bit different. But Diens has the same as kind of Lagoya in terms of right hand like setup. Thibaut Garcia, there's a player of the younger generation who has that right hand right there. And I mean, he's an incredible player, so expressive, great color. Yeah. You know. So it works.
Yeah, and I think all of these things are items that I would recommend that certainly not only I'm interested in, but I would certainly recommend that my students check these things out. Alice has also written that she's made a video that demonstrates Presti's right hand position. And Alice, if you could just send us the link to that video, we can put it in the in our comments. Not in the chat, but in our comments on this video, and then anybody who's watching later can check out your video. I think that thank you very much for offering that. I think that would be really instructive, and I would definitely recommend, certainly for my own students, that they check this out, because there may very well be possibilities that are of improving certain aspects of your technique, the more wide a picture you have of what those techniques can be. I like that idea, but I also mostly like the idea of how does it work for you? You know, I think that's pretty darn important, and it's clearly working for Ida Presti in these videos.
You know, this is a bit of a departure, but bear with me for this one, right? Because I think it comes back round. Pavel Steidl came to Glasgow many times to give concerts at the Conservatoire, and one time he was obviously playing, and people started to like get a bit agitated around the audience, like in the hall, and I was like, what are people getting agitated about? And I could see that the back leg of the piano bench he was on was starting to bend, and it was going to crack. So, but what we didn't realize was Pavel had known about this for about 25 minutes. And he was kind of slightly pushing it a little bit, you know? And then when you looked closely, he wasn't actually sitting on it. He was just sitting like on his calves. Like, you know, he was just kind of like on his haunches. Just kind of sitting like this. And at some point, like, and people were like, like, you could see, people were almost like going to say something and then not. And then it was just all this tension. And like, he'd been sitting for ages, just playing, and he'd changed kind of everything. He'd adjusted lots of things for that moment. And it's a bit like, you know, sometimes when you see a sports person and they're like, okay, I can't do what I normally do every time in the gym right now because this situation has gone a different way. And then they have the ability and the flexibility to change. And like, I can see in the comments and stuff, and I can see, you know, and I think I'd love to see the video from Alice on the right hand. And, you know, I think she said something like it changed within days. And it's like, I think what it always comes back to me is it's a very broad church. And if you can make something work and try something from all sorts of different methodologies, they can come in very useful at different times. There's no point writing one off and saying you don't do it this way, or this way is just better, or that's the archetypal one, or this is the one. Because actually, sometimes, like I've broken nails in concerts and been like, okay, I'm not using that finger now, so now maybe I do have a slightly more Ida Presti right hand because I'm doing everything PA because I don't have an eye finger anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're like, there's only one way that this works, then you're screwed. Like, you know, so it's really helpful to have all of these things as choices, you know, and to have experience. That's my.
I'm sorry, I don't want to blind people. I feel like the sun is this like way too white? Am I okay?
You're okay.
Okay.
You're good.
I feel like this thing is going to make people's eyes disappear forever.
There's one comment. I mean, Alice has been so great. I mean, there's some belters. There's Alice. You're like, the contribution is amazing. But I just have to show this one. I just have to show it. I think that Segovia basically was pretty terrified to see this little kid who could play circles around him as a child of 12. Mm-hmm. I think it mostly boiled down to saying, "Go have a career on the moon," and I think that's hilarious. Alice, you don't know it, but you've started a war.
Yeah, you know who she reminds me of? She reminds me of not Alice. I haven't seen her playing, but Ida Presti reminds me of Anna Vidovic, and it's so sad to think about what her career could have been. I mean, 42 is a long, that's a long time to sort of, as far as like, if she didn't get injured by then, she's probably good to go, you know?
Oh yeah. Oh, totally.
Totally. But you know, I just reading this comment, I'm sort of talking, but yeah, it sort of striked me as like a young Anna Vidovic situation when that Naxos album came out and just blew us. As we were college students having to listen to that and being like, wait a second, I need to go into, I don't know, I need to be a math teacher. You know, this is a 13-year-old and she's completely destroyed everything I've ever thought, you know, about guitar playing.
Now, you see, I haven't seen, maybe you have, I haven't seen any footage. It may not even exist. But I haven't seen any footage of young Presti, and that must have been something really remarkable to see.
I think Matt's got something to say first, actually.
Well, no, I've got some, but I don't have it to play on the show tonight. But people can check it out. There's footage of her playing on a TV program when she's like 10. Oh, in a movie, I think she was like. There's a scene in a film, and she's playing, and she's wearing a dress. Right. Looks like a horse and carriage or something. Like, the entire dress is gigantic, and then there's this tiny little body comes out of it with a guitar, and she's just playing, and it's fantastic, you know. So there is some of that stuff that you see with some of the child prodigies. You know, there's a little bit of it available. You know,
there's also like one recording that I found of her where she's young, and it's super scratchy. So it must have been really early. It must have been the 30s. And she's just playing like one run-on track, but it's like, I think it's like 4 different compositions. It's got like not Vice, but who's the other guy that we all play? He has Divise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it starts with that, and it goes into Tedesco, and it's clearly just like a little kid. You know. Yeah, but that movie's pretty. Yeah, she was in that movie. That's right. I was trying to find that movie too. Couldn't find it. Just like everything else. You found footage of that movie?
Yeah, I'll
playing in it.
I'll put it in the
Couldn't find it
of the video. I'll put it in after the like maybe tomorrow. So I'll put maybe Alice's video on the right hand in, and just a few things that have come up tonight that we can sort of add. There we go. Brilliant. It was a French film. She was about 13, I think, at the time, but was dressed to look older. Yeah, but she's tiny. You can tell.
Wow.
She's so small. And it is available. You can find it on YouTube. You have to do a bit of digging, but it's there, you know. Steve's got a great point. When Paco de Lucia was asked about right-hand position, he said, "I do what suits me, not you." And that's don't try and imitate it, you know. Maybe use the ideas from it,
yes,
and find your own pathway through it, you know. It's amazing stuff. Well, listen, I know Julia is probably tending to a very small person there. So we don't want to keep you for too long, because obviously it's like an hour ahead of where it is in the UK and Germany as well. So we know it's very late for you both. We have a little bit of beautiful Debussy to play, but, you know, with Alexandra and Ida playing, which would be nice. Matthew, do you have anything to wrap up with before we go to that?
Yes, absolutely. I'd just like to, first of all, thank everybody for being a part of the conversation. Brett and Julia and Christian, thank you very much. Those of you who are in the comments, particularly Alice, thank you very much for your insights here. I think they were invaluable. The next episode that we're going to do will be April 16th. We're talking to Christopher Mallet, and we'll be asking Christopher about his most recent Naxos release, which is a survey of the music of Justin Holland, who was an African-American freeborn in Norfolk, Virginia in 1819. And he's this really important, one of the more influential guitarists of the 19th century. And he also published a book that was like a huge bestseller during the time. So we're going even further back in our history with somebody who can help us explore some of this territory in a really interesting way. So again, that's going to be on April 16th. Yeah, that's what I got.
Amazing. Well, just, I know Julia's she's indisposed, but please thank her so much from all of us, Christian, for
I will. Thank you for having us. It was a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure. And have you got any concerts coming up as a duo? When are you next out on the road?
Yeah, we play in Poland in, I think, 1 month with orchestra, which will be nice. And yeah, we have a kind of new program. We made a DVD with music from the 19th century and put it together with some modern music. So we catch the people in the first half with the easy listening music, and then we hope they stay until the end to keep some modern music as well. And yes, I think it's nice. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, we'll look out for it. And when it comes out, please reach out to Matthew and I, because, we'd love to have you on again and chat through things and see where you are.
Yeah, we will. Thank you.
Brilliant. Brett, thanks so much, as always.
Guest emeritus, Brett. It's,
yeah, no problem. And I look forward to that Matt episode, because that's going to be a lot of fun with the Justin Holland. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
They're cool. Duo Noir, him and Thomas Flippin, friends of mine.
They're great.
Yeah, good people.
Yeah. Nice one. Well, listen, we will finish off tonight with some lovely Debussy by Alexandra Lagoya and Ida Presti.
Wow.
Beautiful stuff. Well, thank you all very much for this evening.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Matthew and Matthew.
Bye for now.
And Christian.
Goodbye. Thank you.